My friends, on Saturday morning, February 22, 1986, Cory Aquino arrived in Cebu City, accompanied by daughter Chris and brother Piping. At 1:30 p.m., under the heat of the sun, she led a big rally at the Puente Osmeña Circle. I was the MC of the protest rally, the objective of which was to ask the people to boycott all products of business firms identified with Marcos. The opposition big guns were there at Puente Osmeña. Nene Pimentel, Monche Vitra, Sani Osmeña, Indaynita Cortez de Luz, among many others. Stinging and bombastic speeches were delivered to the delight of the crowd. At around 6 p.m., as Cory was speaking before the fired-up people, news from Manila came that a rebellion was unfolding at EDSA. We thought it best to end the rally outright and bring Cory to a safe place. We proceeded to the residence of Tutsi Kisumbing in Lahug. We listened to more news from Manila. When we felt that the uprising in EDSA was going to escalate, we decided to secure Cory. Where would Cory be safe? Piping agreed with Nancy Cuenco's suggestion that the safest place for Cory would be a monastery. Nancy phoned the sisters at the Carmelite Monastery at Mabolo, Cebu City, and made arrangements with the Mother Superior. The monastery was about 5 kilometers from where we were. I was designated to be the driver. We used Lito Osmeña's new Ford sedan. My passengers were Nancy in the front seat, and Cory, Chris, and Piping at the back seat. Nobody was to know where we were going. I was very nervous. I broke my glasses after I hit a glass door at Kisumbing's house. While I was driving, I sensed that there were vehicles following us. So I zigzagged along the way, cut corners, trying to lose every vehicle that was following us. When we arrived at the huge iron gate of the monastery, it was a little bit ajar. Seconds later, the gatekeeper waved us in. We were welcomed warmly by the Mother Superior and some 25 nuns who were holding their rosaries. Then the gates were closed, and we felt safe inside the high walls of the monastery. The sisters gave Cory, Chris, and Nancy a big room for the three of them. Piping and I were given a small room for the two of us. Piping and I could not sleep, our ears glued to the transistor radio, which was tuned to Radio Veritas. At 7 a.m., the following day, Sunday, that was February 23, the sisters served us breakfast at the dining hall. I remember Chris complaining that she was bitten by mosquitoes because there were no mosquito nets in her room. A few minutes later, Nene Pimentel, Onching Mitra, Sani Osmeña, Indaynita, and American Consul Blaine Porter arrived. Before we left the monastery to proceed to Hotel Magellan, where the media people were waiting for Cory, she wrote this press statement. Cory Aquino's statement on February 23, 1986. A week ago, on February 16, I launched my non-violent and peaceful protest in order to pressure Mr. Marcos to respect the people's mandate. Millions of our countrymen answered my call to boycott the enterprises associated with Mr. Marcos and his cronies. Yesterday, two high-ranking officials, namely Minister of Defense Juan Ponce Enrile, Lieutenant General Fidel Ramos, in a surprise move, finally broke away from the Marcos government to uphold the people's choice of Cory Aquino and Doy Laurel. I appeal to our brothers and sisters throughout the nation and to those who are now in Camp Aguinaldo to continue giving their full support to this peaceful struggle. I also call on other government officials to disassociate themselves from the Marcos regime now and to follow the lead taken by Supreme Court Justice Nestor Alambay and Postmaster General Roy Logoles, among others. For the sake of the Filipino people, I ask Mr. Marcos to step down now so that we can have a peaceful transition of government. Cebu City, Philippines, signed Cory Aquino. And she made a footnote. She says, "Dear Tony, this is certainly a most memorable time. Cory." A tribute to Ninoy. This was the privileged speech delivered by Congressman Antonio Cuenco on August 18, 2009, in memory of Benigno S. Aquino Jr. Mr. Speaker, we mark on Friday the 26th death anniversary of Benigno S. Aquino Jr. His assassination on August 21, 1983, wounded the Filipino soul and focused the world's attention on our nation's agonizing drama. Today, we no longer feel shock and grief of that hideous moment, which we shall never forget all the days of our lives. Yet, the memory of his heroism still pervades our land. His sacrificial offering is etched imperishably on the soul of this nation. His name is forever stamped upon our hearts and our collective memory. Those of us who are privileged by his friendship cannot be blamed for luxuriating in that honor. Anyone who has been personally associated with him will always glory in that fact. We who were his friends, we who were his party colleagues, we who were advocates of his cause, fighting the same battles, we carry until now our association with him as a medal we shall always proudly pin on our breasts. For he was a giant among Lilliputians, the warrior in residence of our political formations, the battleship among tugboats, both the spearhead and the beacon light, whom our people lionized in life and revered in death. So today, I rise, Mr. Speaker, to talk of this great and immortal man for my own special and personal reasons. You know, even before I got elected to this chamber in 1965, at age 29, I had already been honored by his friendship. For he used to come to my home city of Cebu as he perambulated magnificently all over the country in search of his impossible dream. He always traveled with dazzling speed and liberating impact. Amid the political thunderstorms of those days, he was like a flash of lightning on the dark horizon. After his election to the Senate in 1967, against formidable odds, since he was primary target of Ferdinand Marcos, he gathered around him the Liberal Party's Young Turks. Well, he was like a resplendent eagle flying above the raging sea, emerging as a spinning, whirling, exploding oppositionist wizard who rained fire and brimstone on the Marcos administration. Not even the mailed fist of martial law, not even the debilitating sorrows of solitary confinement stopped him. The rest is history, Mr. Speaker, and I shall not presume to retell the epic of his valiant struggle. But permit me to recall my experience with him a few days before he met his heroic fate and took his place in the pantheon of the ages. Before he left the United States on that final journey, I was able to talk with him through long-distance telephone for the benefit of Cebu's radio and television audiences. Speaking at his characteristic fast clip, it was clear he was still the same fighting Ninoy we had known all along. He was vibrant, forceful, eloquent, defiant of the odds. And he was focused on what was happening to our country and what he could do to help. In a word, he wanted not only to observe, but also to serve. At the time of our telephone conversation, my father-in-law was sick in Ninoy's home province of Pampanga. Ever thoughtful, Ninoy asked me how he was. I did not know how he came to know about my father-in-law, that he was in the hospital. But that was Ninoy the politician. He was always better informed about everything than anyone else. In our telephone conversation, he said he was determined to return. He saw it as his duty to his people, which he intended to carry out, regardless of the consequences. While some of us doubted the wisdom of his move, not a single one doubted his courage. He was the bravest man we ever met, and his bravery was founded not on recklessness, not on ulterior motives, not on plain indifference to fate, but on the resolve to carry out the duty the patriot owed his country. He also noted to me that some of the anti-Marcos oppositionists were being harassed by the dictatorship. He felt his homecoming would take much of the heat off them. In other words, he was coming home not as a matter of personal convenience, but to carry on his peaceful struggle to restore the rights and liberties of the people. Today, 26 years after his murder, there are those who strive to denigrate his heroism or derogate his ideals. But they will fail to remove him from his place in the eternal and universal shrine of honor, for he had validated his greatness and patriotism to the jubilation of his friends and the consternation of his enemies. There is nothing now that they can do or say to detract from his glory. And we, who had been his friends, we who had mourned his loss beyond tears, even while we celebrated his victory beyond words, we will always feel that deep and abiding admiration for him, his heroism, his epic struggle, and his stirring words. We will always live with the ineffable memory of his watchful concern for this land that he loved and for our people in whose name he died. It is true that Cory Aquino suffered. It is true that he went through moments of great anguish. And it is true that his enemies succeeded in taking his life. But it is no less true that ultimately he was victor rather than vanquished. And for a long time to come, this nation will celebrate that triumph. For as Ernest Hemingway once phrased it, man is not made for defeat. Man can be destroyed, but not defeated. And so, Mr. Speaker, the lessons we have learned from Ninoy's heroism can be measured only in astronomical proportions. Such is the magnitude and meaning of his sacrifice that it set off a succession of events leading to the liberation of our people. Surely, this was no ordinary man, and his assassination was no ordinary murder. Surely, this was of Himalayan dimensions, and surely, he was a hero, undeniable and complete, deserving of the highest honor within the gift of our people. Mr. Speaker, I close by quoting a few lines from an elegy written by the poet Nina Puyat just before Ninoy was buried 26 years ago. What shall we offer him tomorrow when they return him to the waiting earth? Shall we send him our unredeemed national shame to take with him to eternity? Or shall we be united with his spirit, at last free, that spark of God within us, our concern for our neighbor, no matter how distant and unknown, the purity of our motivations, the unswerving faithfulness of our commitments? Each and every one of us, one by one, must defend the 1 foot square of land on which we kneel or on which we stand. The battle for freedom is not over. It is never over. The blessings of peace have not yet arrived. Our dream of national reconciliation is still floating in our tormented skies. But dry your tears. Dry your tears, my brothers. Ninoy is dead, but we and our children live. In all of us, he will continue to live. Mr. Speaker, our country through all these years has been rocked by many upheavals. Again and again, we've seen our people rebel against tyranny and injustice. Many times we've seen blood spilled, and yet we remain captive to our own vices and frailties. We are shackled with poverty, and yet we know not how to solve this perennial problem. Mr. Speaker, what I believe we really need are not rebellions, not seditions, not coup d'etats. What we need badly is a genuine revolution of the heart. To achieve this inner revolution, we as people must internalize the example of our generation of heroes. Ninoy, inspire us with your heroism now and forever. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.